We'll stay on that issue because just when you thought the Albanese government could not get any worse, it does. Today, the government announced changes to the Future Fund, the $300 billion locked box that Peter Costello set up to pay military and public service pensions so that they wouldn't be a burden on future taxpayers. Now, as originally set up in 2005 and as it's been run ever since, under governments of both persuasions until now, the Future Fund made its investment decisions based solely on what would provide the best possible return for taxpayers. But not anymore. Today, Treasurer Jim Chalmers said that the fund's mandate would change and that it would be required to make investment decisions based on, quote, national priorities.
The new investment mandate will require the fund to consider priorities like housing, the energy transformation, and also making sure that when it comes to infrastructure, that there's a particular emphasis on resilience and security as well.
No one should underestimate the gravity of this move. The government's saying that our national savings should be invested in its political priority areas. Effectively, it's stealing from the taxpayers the future by saying that returns to them are not as important as the political needs of the government today. Weighing into this debate this afternoon, Peta Costello's condemned the move, arguing that it risked turning Australia's sovereign wealth fund into a political slush fund, undermining its independence and ultimately, he says, leading to lower returns. Now, Costello, who set up the fund and then for the past decade has been the chairman of the Future Fund, rejected the claim by Jim Chalmers that the fund's rate of return, currently between 4 and 5% per annum, would not be impacted. Costello said, you only change things to make them different. You don't change things to keep them the same. The only purpose of requiring the board to consider national priorities, said Costello, is to get a whole lot of projects that wouldn't come in under the sole 4 to 5% return mandate into consideration. It will ultimately lower returns, he said, and that will cost taxpayers money. This is a bad proposal, said Costello. It was never set up to be a political slush fund to finance the whim of the government of the day. Now, on top of all the other ideologically driven blunderings of this government, this is a truly monumental move, and almost across the board, it's been condemned. In sheer budget and economic management terms, what a shocker this Labor mob have turned out to be. There's the productivity-destroying workplace changes to crack down on outsourcing and casual work. Then there's the power subsidies to part compensate people for skyrocketing power prices that Labor's own green policies are forcing on households. There's the taxpayer-funded boost to the wages of people privately employed in childcare and aged care. There's the ongoing energy insanity of saying that nuclear power at sea must be supported, yet demonising that very same power source on land. There's the deliberate sabotage of the coal and gas industries that are 2 of our 3 biggest export earners, and that without their revenue, our budget position would be in even worse shape. Then there's the utter folly of simply writing off 20% of HECS debts, a free gift to students who'll go on to earn higher than average wages because of their degrees, to be funded for by relatively poor wage earners today. And then this, a government that can't help putting its hands on money that belongs to us. But this isn't the first time that this government and this Treasurer have tried to bully fund managers into doing the government's bidding with your money. A Treasury paper on the objectives of compulsory super, released last year, said there should be, and I quote, alignment between the financial interests of super fund members and national economic priorities. There it is, that phrase again, national economic priorities. But if the money that we're forced to put into super has to be invested in the government's so-called national economic priorities, then it's not really our money, is it? And if the money that Peter Costello put into the locked box that has to be spent now under Chalmers on the government's so-called national economic priorities, well, these are Labor's election priorities, let's call them that it's no longer a locked box, it's no longer a sovereign wealth fund, and it's no longer being used to meet future obligations like pensions for our veterans. Instead, under this shock move today by the Treasurer, our assets are being confiscated and ransacked by this government for its own political purposes. Now, why should the Future Fund be forced to invest in dodgy renewable power schemes that only make a profit because of forced consumer subsidies? Why should it be forced to invest in build-to-rent projects just because this government wants to turn a nation of homeowners into a nation of renters and kill off the Australian dream to own a home of our own? As Costello said today, he expected a long line of rent seekers to form a queue outside the Future Fund. And he made the valid point that other government funds already investing in housing and green energy, such as the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, he said, well, they've not done very well. Now, if these things are good investments, if they stack up, then no one should need to force the Future Fund to make investments in them. If they're poor investments, as many of them are, then it's criminal to force the Future Fund to waste our money on them. Until now, the Future Fund has done its job without political interference. It's made Australia, it's made all of us hundreds of billions of dollars richer because its investments have been done very carefully. And now these clowns in Canberra, who could make wasting money a gold medal sport, want to upend the rules and use your money to help them win the next election. Now, this is a scandal. As Peta Costello often used to say, you can't trust Labor with money. And almost nothing vindicates that judgment more than this vandalisation today of his great legacy to Australia.